This video is sponsored by Quince. As both a lifelong fantasy reader and a romantic at heart, I have felt personally antagonized by romantasy as a genre because it feels like it was grown in a lab by scientists specifically attempting to create the most diabolical combination of my pet peeves and frustrations, all wrapped up in a single book, or many books, as the case may be. And many of the most beloved examples of the genre are books that I find grating, to say the least. And while there are exceptions, they are exceptions, not the norm. I made a video essay on this topic very recently, so I will link that for you in all the places if you want that background and you want to hear my thoughts and theories on why romantasy is the way it is. But as part of that video, I asked all of you to give me recommendations for romantasy that you have loved, that is different, that is unique, that is subverting common tropes, or at the very least, not rehashing the same tropes again and again. And y'all really delivered. There are so many recommendations in the comments of that video, so thank you all so much. I'm very excited to check them out. But by far, the number one recommendation, the book that came up again and again and again in those comments, was The Everlasting by Alix E. Harrow. And I'd already heard of this book. It was already on my TBR. So many bookish creators I follow have read and raved about this book. I have heard amazing things. I already wanted to read it, but seeing how often it was recommended in the comments of my video essay, the number of times that people said that it's doing something completely different, that it's subverting the genre, that it's something truly special, made me realized that I just had to bump it right up to the top of my TBR. I had to get a copy immediately. I had to give it a try for myself and find out if it really does walk that really careful tightrope between subverting all of the most common tropes of romantasy while still firmly existing within the genre. And that's a challenge because I have noticed a tendency within romantasy spaces to gatekeep the term romantasy for books that have a very specific combination of tropes, and anything outside of that very narrow lane gets kicked out. I talk about that more in the video essay if you're interested. But this book, again, I haven't read it yet, but it seems to have managed it. I've seen it on so many big mainstream romantasy lists. I have seen so many people who are pretty much exclusively romantasy readers recommending this as romantasy. It seems like Alix E. Harrow has managed to do something really interesting here, and I can't wait to dive in and find out for myself if this is going to be my kind of romantasy, if I'm going to be swept up in the romance of it all, if I'm going to love this as much as everyone else seems to. So if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on The Everlasting, if you've been waiting for me to read this, if you have been waiting to read the book yourself and you're looking for a sign, here it is. Read it with me if you like. I am planning on doing regular check-ins as I go to let you know my thoughts. And of course, anytime I get into spoiler territory, I will warn you very clearly, and there will be chapters, as always, in the description box for you to skip over those sections if you don't want any spoilers. But I absolutely cannot wait to dive into this one. I am so excited. And again, nervous because my expectations are sky high, but I feel like if any book can meet them, it might be this one based on all the reactions and all the love I've seen. So fingers crossed. This video is kindly sponsored by Quince. Quince is your one-stop shop for high-quality yet affordable essentials, from clothing to home goods to accessories and more, working directly with manufacturers to cut out the middlemen so you don't have to pay the huge markup. Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and uses the highest quality fabrics and materials. As I've mentioned many times in the past, my favorite place in the world is my bed. I spend so much time here, and it's important to me that my bed be cozy and comfortable and feel like a luxurious, relaxing experience, whether I'm trying to get my beauty rest or spending hours devouring a great book. And Quince has helped me do that with sheets that not only feel like hotel luxury, but look absolutely adorable for spring, if I do say so myself. I went with the classic percale gingham duvet cover and sham set in olive. As soon as I saw this set, I had to have it immediately. I'm obsessed with gingham. Maybe that makes me basic. I don't care. I love gingham. Not only does it feel very spring and summer to me, but it has this cozy, homey, slightly traditional, slightly whimsical feel to it that I just cannot resist. And I knew the olive gingham in our olive green bedroom would just be the most perfect combination, and I think I was correct. I love it so much, and you know I love green, as evidenced by everything in the frame right now. And these are made from 100% organic cotton percale, which makes them soft, breathable, and really gentle on the skin. These sheets are Oikotex certified, made in a fair trade certified factory, and in a factory that recycles and reuses 99% of its water. Now for the actual sheet set, I decided to go for something a little different with jersey sheets. I've had jersey sheets a few times in my life, and what I've always loved about them is how cozy and comfortable they feel, like your favorite t-shirt. And even though it is technically spring now, and I am leaning into the spring vibes with the gingham, it is still absolutely freezing outside where I live in Canada. Snow is everywhere. So the idea of combining this very spring-like, whimsical gingham with the coziness and the softness of a jersey sheet underneath, so we can be all warm and toasty through these cold Canadian nights, is just the absolute perfect combination, in my opinion. I love how jersey only gets softer and more comfortable over time, and how cozy and casual it feels. These jersey sheets from Quince are made from 100% organic cotton, free from harsh chemicals and synthetic materials. I also love all the attention to detail. The fitted sheet has little tags letting you know what's the side and what's the top or bottom, which is something I always struggle with as a king-size bed owner, because it's almost a perfect square, and yet I always put the sheet on the wrong way and it doesn't quite fit. So the fact that they thought to sew in little fabric tags to make your life easier every time you make your bed is just yet another example of how Quince is really thinking about your experience with their products over the long term, and it's something I appreciate so much. I also love that the duvet cover has little ties so you can attach it to your duvet so you don't have the dreaded duvet slipping and sliding all over inside the cover. They even have additional ties at the top and bottom in the middle, which my duvet doesn't have little loops for, but you can bet I'm going to be sewing some on so I can take advantage of keeping my duvet perfectly spread out and even through the duvet cover, no matter how much I toss and turn and how many times our cats decide to play tag on the bed at 2 in the morning. Thank you again to Quince for sponsoring this video. Use this QR code or the link in my description box to elevate your home with Quince. Don't forget they have 365-day a year free shipping and returns as well. Thank you again to Quince for sponsoring this video, and now I'm going to hop under the covers and start reading The Everlasting. I truly cannot wait. Let's do it. Okay, so I just finished page 12, which is the end of the first official chapter. There's a little prologue sort of thing, and then there's a little epistolary interlude, and then there's chapter 1. So I just finished those 3 little sections, and I have a good feeling. This is great so far. I'm loving it. I love the combination of the different writing styles, the really wide gulf between the writing style of The Death of Una Everlasting, this sort of ancient text telling the story of this legendary knight in a very fairy tale-like writing style, and then contrasting that with the much more personable and also quite funny, unexpectedly funny prose of the more modern, I mean, it's not modern day. I don't know yet what the setting is meant to be. It seems like it might be sort of around one of the world wars sort of time period. The modern day timeline focuses on our protagonist Owen, who is an academic. He has had this mysterious ancient book, centuries old book, The Death of Una Everlasting, delivered anonymously to his office at the university, and he's extremely excited because this could change his whole life. This could make him world renowned. This is, the greatest discovery of his lifetime, essentially, within his field of study. So he is extremely excited about about the possibilities here. And me too. I am also extremely excited about the possibilities here. I'm already having a great time, not only because I'm really enjoying the writing style, especially the fairy tale-like retelling of a legend from the actual book, The Death of Una Everlasting, but also because the narration is top-notch. Sid Segar is doing the Owen narration, and the narrator for the Death of Una Everlasting chapters, or sections, at least it seems so far that that's going to be the case, is probably my favorite narrator of all time, Moira Quirk, who does the Locked Tomb series, also did Blood Over Brighthaven, and many other things, and she's amazing. And as soon as the audiobook started and I heard Moira Quirk's name, I was like a little kid on Christmas morning. I should have been filming myself because I started giggling. She's so great. She really breathes life into the writing style, and it just makes it even more lovely and luscious than it already is to read it. But for the fairy tale style, we start with, "It begins where it ends, beneath the yew tree. The yew stands in the wood like a great queen grown old, limbs racked with age, head bowed by the weight of her crown." Also, I apologize if my voice is a little raspy. I got carried away belting show tunes this morning. No, there's no more context to that. That's just what I was doing as I was getting ready to film today. Anyway, over the years, Una gathered more names. She became the Queen's Champion, the Red Knight, the Virgin Saint, the Drawn Blade of Dominion. She became Sir Una Everlasting, hero and paragon, arcing through history like a bright-tailed comet. She became a legend. So as you can see, it's this very fairy tale written down exactly as it would be told around a fire kind of feeling to it. It has a very epic, rich with history sort of weight to it, which I love. It's just beautiful. And then we jump right into this little interlude of epistolary telegrams back and forth, starting with, "Would be the find of the century were it not a crock of shit," which of course it is. Analysis suggests it is at least a very old crock of shit, ma'am. And it continues. And I was honestly very surprised by the immediate humor coming in through this, because the first section doesn't have humor to it. It's very sort of grand and imperious and lyrical and lovely, but it doesn't necessarily have like a naturalistic quality or a humor to it. And then we immediately have that tone shift, and I thought it was very well done. It sort of cuts the tension of this dramatic introduction to a fantasy story with this silliness back and forth. And then as we get into the first official chapter with Owen as our protagonist, we carry that humor forward. Several years after the war, during the mid-afternoon hour, I generally put aside to fantasize about setting fire to my manuscript and disappearing into the countryside to raise goats. I received a book in the post. And that kind of feeling continues in an absolutely delightful way. "There you are." Harrison rounded the corner and slouched against the doorframe, looking, as usual, like an escapee from a painting of a fox hunt. "How's the book coming?" He asked this question 2 or 3 times a week, because he was at heart a bastard who reveled in the suffering of others. Very entertaining already. I feel like Owen's characterization is fantastic already. We have a lot of little hints about the kind of person he is and his mannerisms and his wants, his interests, his ways of communicating. I feel like we don't know Una quite as well yet because the tale was very much in third person and talking about her as this great legendary figure, and this was her origin story that everyone's heard a million times, and so it has this sort of dispassionate disconnect to it, whereas Owen's chapter is very much in the action and in his mind as he thinks ridiculous, silly things. And I'm very excited to hopefully continue to have that contrast as the book goes on, because it felt like both styles were done exceptionally well, and I enjoyed them both for their own merits in their own ways. And yeah, very pleasantly surprised by how funny it is. I did not expect that. I feel like I'm smiling like a fool because I had such a great time with it, and I'm very excited to keep going, so I'm gonna go do that. I don't have any spoiler thoughts yet. There's not really anything to spoil at the very beginning, but I'm very excited to get more world building and to learn more about both these characters and learn more about this legend and why she is so well known and why he's so excited to find this retelling of her life and why this is such a huge boon for him in his academic career, and follow these characters as their stories progress. So I'm excited. I'm having fun so far. I feel like those of you who recommended this to me, again, I've read 12 pages. Maybe I'm speaking too soon. Maybe I should hold my tongue until more of the book happens. But I have a feeling that those of you who recommended this to me know my taste very well and were right that I would love this. So I'm going to read to page 77, which is the end of chapter 6, before I come back to check in. If you're reading along with me, let me know your impressions up to the end of chapter 1 in the comments. I would love to know how you reacted to the beginning of the book. Also, let me know know if you've read more Alix E. Harrow, if this writing style is indicative of her style in her other works, and which one is maybe more consistently used, or maybe both. I'm curious because I'm getting excited that I might want to read more of her work, but I'm wondering which style, because they're very different, might be the style that she typically writes in. If either, maybe she writes in all kinds of different styles and every book is different. You can tell me in the comments. Okay, I'm gonna go now because I'm rambling. Goodbye. Okay, I'm at the 25% mark. I am loving this so far. I really like Una. We're getting to know her more, and she is just fantastic. I love that she is a very traditionally masculine knight hero sort of character as a woman, portrayed to be beautiful, that she is tall and strong and physically imposing, that she has corded muscle in her arms, that she is this physically capable knight, and that she is beautiful and entrancing and fascinating for that, not despite. It's so lovely to have a female hero of a story who isn't apparently a great fighter, but also has zero muscle on their body at all and is the teeny tiniest ever. So that's great. And I love that she's taller than the man who I presume will be her love interest. I also love that she is clearly bisexual. She is open about having had relationships with women and is clearly also attracted to men. So love that. Love some bisexual representation. And I also really appreciate that while she is this legendary figure, she is this hero, she is revered by many, but she also is clearly racked with guilt and doubt about her part in essentially the colonization of these lands, the creation of this dominion, of this empire, that she feels that her entire life has been devoted to violence and killing. And is it worth it? Is she actually doing the right thing? Has she used her skills, her strengths for the ultimate good, or is she making the world a worse place? And either way, can she live with herself and what she's done? I feel like that complexity is not often explored in these kinds of characters. So much of fantasy, so much romantasy explores worlds that are at war without ever really grappling with the emotional toll of war and of killing. And I love that we see both for Owen, his trauma, his experience of being on the front, and also for Una, we see the ways that she has come to almost be afraid of her own capacity for violence and to expect others to be afraid of her, and the toll that that has taken on her sort of self-isolation because she feels that she is dangerous and possibly incapable of softness and tenderness, only good for one thing, and that is violence and killing. And I just think that complexity is often lost. An example of a book that does it well, although I have other issues with the book, I think that it's not a perfect book, but I think sort of Kaigan by M.L. Wang does a really great job of trying to at least acknowledge and examine the emotional toll of war and death and these epic battles that in so much fantasy end in a bloody way, but then everyone moves on as if nothing happened and there's no real guilt, remorse, trauma, grief. And if it is acknowledged, it often feels like lip service and it doesn't necessarily land or feel particularly grounded. So anyway, I'm appreciating that. I really find Una to be a fascinating character, especially because we are not in her head. And so she's a bit of a mysterious figure, and I'm kind of craving every little bit of, every tidbit, every crumb of information about her that we get. I'm just lapping it up. Love her. And I find Owen to be a really interesting character as well. And we are meant, I think, to side with him, to like him, to relate to him. He is sort of our slightly more familiar, slightly more modern character to bring us into this medieval style fantasy world. And yet he is totally caught up by the propaganda of his state And I love that the book is very explicitly calling out the propaganda and presenting it in very clear terms as propaganda, and presenting the xenophobia, the racism, the imperialism of the Dominion, and the toll that that takes on various groups of people within and without. And for him, as someone who looks other, it seems implied so far that he perhaps resembles a group similar to the Romani, thinks specifically described as travelers in the text. And he is viewed with suspicion as someone other within Dominion because he is not fair. And he has sort of reacted to this by trying to prove as much as he can to everyone that he is loyal to Dominion, that he is a true Dominion citizen. It, again, has sort of bought fully into the propaganda, hook, line, and sinker. And it will be interesting to see as he learns more about Una's story, as he explores her story more, as he translates, if he is impacted at all by her perspective and her jadedness and her regret and questioning of the validity of this Dominion, of this imperialism, if he will come to see the error of the Dominion's ways, if he will come to sort of see through their propaganda, or if he will be unable to let go of that conditioning and of that drive that he has that has been, again, pretty explicitly stated in the text to prove that he deserves to be there, that he is loyal, that he is the most Dominion of Dominion citizens who will dedicate his life to making Dominion stronger and greater. I think that's an interesting tension, and I can see many ways in which it could go badly and be very sad. And I'm hoping that I'm wrong about that. But I'm curious to see where it goes. And I find both characters interesting as much as I find Owen a little frustrating because he feels a little naive. But I think all of his traits make sense and are based in characterization that makes sense, that have grown from his experiences. But I do want him to open his eyes a little more and maybe have the courage to step out of what he's been taught to think for himself and make decisions for himself. So we shall see. I also love the queer rep so far. Like I said, Una is explicitly attracted to multiple genders. Love that for her. We also hear about other queer characters in the periphery. Owen knows of and has interacted with queer people in his life in the sort of World War II inspired modern timeline. Una is surrounded by other queer people in her life in the sort of medieval inspired era. So that's great and lovely and wonderful. And I also love that there's an acknowledgement both in Una's time that while she is a woman, she is an exception to the rule and she's not really allowed to be a woman because everything that she is the opposite of what women are supposed to be. And she has this power, but she also has this access and she has rights and privileges that no other woman has in society. And she is given those rights and freedoms as an exception to the rule because she is the one, the original knight, and has this special privilege, not because women just have this kind of freedom in her society. And also in Owen's more modern timeline, the Minister of War is a woman for the first time. And she also acknowledges how she may be, in this powerful position, but if they can, the men with power would happily blame anything that's going wrong on her, one woman, and oust her to sort of fix the problem and to use her as a scapegoat. And then yet another example with Owen's advisor at university. I wonder that you of all people could fail to appreciate the need for further study of Una Everlasting. This I thought was clever of me. Sawbridge was the only female professor in the whole of Cantford. Her story tells us that a woman might take up arms as well as a man, that she might fight, even lead, so long as she dies before she starts wondering why she can't vote, divorce, or open a bank account. Do not patronize me, Mallory. So I find it very interesting that it's a very patriarchal world, both in the past and the present, and yet we see several women in power, but again, each one of them are an exception to the rule and are sort of treated as other. And I think it's interesting to see that tension between women in power within a society that is quite misogynistic and what their experiences are like being one of the few women to have been allowed any extra freedoms or any power whatsoever. So I'll be curious to see how that develops as we go on. I'm really liking the writing style still. We're spending a bit more time in the more modern storytelling and less of the fairy tale storytelling, but we still get little snippets, little excerpts of the more fairy tale retelling of Una. And I still love that sort of Arthurian legend style, fairy tale style writing, but I do really love the modern writing as well. And we're continuing to have the humor moving forward, which is nice. I find it quite entertaining. The humor definitely works for me. We're already starting to develop a bit of a romance romantic undertone, some sexual tension. I don't want to spoil anything, and I feel like it might count as spoilers to talk about who is involved in what I think is going to be the central romance, central couple of the story. But I will say that if it is the characters I think it is a heterosexual pairing, but many of the dynamics flipped in terms of what is common in Romantasy, including which of the characters is taller and stronger and more capable, and who is dominant and who is submissive. And I'm excited for that. If I'm right, we'll do a spoiler section for those of you who have read it. I'm trying to be cagey. We don't have enough yet to totally confirm what their dynamic is going to be like, because it's a bit of a slow build so far, and there hasn't been anything crossing the line between these characters from platonic to romantic. But there are feelings, at least on one side for sure, and there's a bit of a push and pull and a tension. So I'm excited to see that dynamic play out. And now I'm going to do spoilers just briefly for the first 25%. So skip this if you haven't read it yet. Spoilers starting now. Use the chapters to jump to the end of the spoilers for this section. Okay, so spoilers for the first 25%. So Owen was sent back in time because the Minister of War stabbed him through the hand on top of the book and sent him back in time, basically to ensure that Una does her final quest, because she's pretty much lost all motivation. She's wondering what the purpose is, if she's doing the right thing. She doesn't want to go kill another dragon. She isn't sure if she should go find the Grail and help her queen stay alive. She doesn't know if she is on board with this imperialist dominion attitude, this conquering. And she's gone back to her childhood home where her two dads lived. And I loved that added detail that she had two dads, but the legend tells it as she had one man who found her in the woods and she had that single father, whereas in reality she had two dads. And even Owen, who has now been sent back in time and is learning these details from her, thinks, well, I'm not going to include that because that opens a whole other can of worms. I never thought about homosexuality as being something that existed through time. I thought that was a modern invention, which is just, laughably stupid, but lots of people think that. And, I don't want to make it too complicated, so I won't include that detail. They don't need to know everything. And it's just, he keeps saying that as he goes on, as he learns more about Una, as he learns more about her actual personality and how she really feels about everything, and how the people of Dominion feel about her, because so many of them actually don't revere her or see her as a hero. They see her as a tool of the oppressor. She is the axe. She is the sword arm of Dominion that is forcing them to live under a system that they didn't choose, and they're not a fan. And again, Owen thinks, well, I can't really say that because that wouldn't inspire the youth of Dominion in the modern day to go to war, so let's just leave that out. And I'm waiting for Owen to have that breakthrough moment of maybe the truth is actually worth sharing, and that just feeding into the propaganda machine perhaps is not the best use of his time on Earth, or whatever planet this is. If this isn't Earth, I don't know. We'll see. I'm waiting for him to have that realization. He's not quite there yet. And he spent his whole life having the hots for Una as a mythical figure, as a legend. And now that he's hanging out with her, the hots are heating up even more. I love the details of him being attracted to her physical size and the corded muscles in her arm, and the way that she can hold a sword. She can wield a sword that other people would struggle to lift with two hands, with a single hand. She just has that confidence and body awareness and strength. The way it describes, them riding the horse together and him sitting in front of her and her sort of encompassing him, and him having moments of, I believe that they are either meant to be panic attacks or a PTSD episode, possibly both, or a combination of the above. But he has these moments of sort of dissociating into his panic, and she just holds him until it's over, until he's done shivering, until he's done shaking, and is able to sort of come back to himself. And there's something very tender about that, and it does feel like their emotional connection is building, as well as that sexual attraction that he clearly already had for her from the beginning. And it seems like she has at least some level of attraction to him as well. Although it was so sad, they had this moment where it seemed like they might kiss, and then he realized or remembered that he was helping her go to her death, that he was leading her to her final quest where she would die. And he had this revulsion at himself for betraying her, essentially, and recoils from her, but she perceives it as recoiling from her, for another reason. Like he's disturbed by the idea of kissing her for some other reason. And she sort of withdraws back into herself. And it was so sad. It really hit me real deep. Just that moment of vulnerability and then the rejection and that miscommunication and her not understanding that it's a disgust with himself that caused him to recoil, nothing to do with her. I mean, obviously, maybe she wouldn't want to kiss him at all if she knew he was leading her to her death. But that's a whole other issue. It just makes me sad that she felt that he was maybe, disgusted with the idea of kissing her because she's not womanly enough or something. Because she talks about feeling like she isn't able to be either a woman or a man to anyone's satisfaction. And she just sort of exists in this liminal space between where she is just herself, but she feels like she's never been good at being herself. A woman may not dress as I do or bear arms or carry any device that is not her husband's or father's, yet I do these things, and I am not punished by church or crown. And so it is easier for most people if I am not a woman. Do you mind it? I couldn't say. Yvain dresses me in fine gowns sometimes for holy days and feasts. The first time I tripped over my hem, and the whole court laughed and laughed. I am not sure which I prefer, to be taken for something I am not, or to fail at being what I am. A weird shock went through me, as if I'd caught a glimpse of myself in a mirror I hadn't known was there. I knew what it was, to feel you were doing a poor impression of what you were. I just love the nuance of that portrayal, and I love that she is explicitly several inches taller than him, and she's bigger and more muscular, more imposing and strong than he is, and that he is just unabashedly attracted to that and into it. And I'm looking forward to seeing how their dynamic progresses over time as a tall woman. I mean, I'm not very muscular, sadly. I've never been very muscular. Even when I lifted weights multiple times a week, had a personal trainer for a while there. I don't build muscle very easily, but I am a very tall woman. I'm 5'10", and I definitely had to come to terms with the fact that I would never be small. I would never be a tiny, dainty woman. And I think, deconstructing society's messages that being a woman requires being small and frail and dainty, that the only right combination is a small woman and a large man, and that dynamic is the only one that is attractive or fulfilling or that is natural or something. It took me a while to do that deconstructing, and because I have spent a lot of time figuring out how I actually feel about myself and my body and the physical space I take up, and how I actually feel about other people, and whether I do need to feel small to feel attractive. And the answer is no, I don't. I don't need to be smaller than a partner to find them sexy, to feel needed and wanted and desired, to have that attraction and that mutual attraction, and to have a great time. And so I think because I've done that work and because I've deconstructed so much of that, I struggle to read books that just reinforce that dynamic again and again without any interrogation, without any variation on a theme, continuing to reinforce it as just natural while ignoring that there are so many different people on the planet. There are so many different combinations of sizes and shapes, and that your soulmate, if you believe in soulmates, might not be the, pairing that you expect. And to throw someone away, to throw away a lifelong love for something like that is, in my opinion, quite shallow. It's really nice sometimes, every once in a while to feel represented in a book. I mean, again, Una could crush me like a bug because I am not strong. It is lovely to see a dynamic where a taller woman can be attracted to a shorter man and vice versa, and that it's not treated as some sort of weird, aberrant, unnatural, unusual thing. It's just two humans being attracted to each other. And isn't that how it should be? Why should we limit ourselves to these expectations, which again, how many people can fulfill them? The average woman is shorter than the average man, but there are a lot of people who are not average, and limiting yourself to such a narrow dynamic is, only limiting your own possible happiness and experiences, in my personal opinion. So anyway, I love seeing this dynamic. I feel seen by it. It does make me feel like I should go to the gym more ever so I can have muscles, so I can not only be tall and imposing, but I can also be strong, because I've never been all that strong, but I also don't really enjoy the gym. So anyway, maybe that will be a 2027 New Year's resolution. But I am very excited to see their dynamic progress. I love that they are starting to get to know each other, open up to each other, have these vulnerable, intimate moments, and that Owen is just so attracted to her that he can barely contain it and is trying to be respectful, but is losing his head, and that she seems to be attracted to him as well, but is very reticent to open up and be intimate with someone, be vulnerable with someone, and struggling to believe that he could not be afraid of her because she has lived her life as this boogie woman for Dominion, as the sword of the crown, as this dangerous, violent knight. And and she deserves that tenderness and love. I want that for her. And I also want Owen to become a better, less cowardly and more in line with his values person so he can deserve her. I hope that he confesses how her story ends before they get to where the Grail is so that she can make the choice of whether she wants to complete this final mission, knowing that it likely will end in her death instead of being led to her doom with no choice when he could save her. I'm worried it's going to go in a tragedy direction, and I'm going to start really disliking Owen for choosing this imperialist propaganda machine dominion over the woman he is probably definitely going to grow to love and also kind of already does. But I don't know if I see that happening. I'm a little scared. I'm a little worried, but I'm enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm excited to see how things progress. I'm excited for them to have their first kiss. I want them to hold hands. I'm excited about them falling in love, hopefully, and opening up to each other. But I also am scared because I don't want Owen to be deceiving her the whole time and ruin everything because he's too cowardly to tell her the truth and risk changing history by being honest with her. So clearly it's working because I'm very emotionally invested. Those are spoilers for the first quarter of The Everlasting. I'm going to go reach the halfway point. I'm so excited to know what happens. I'm a little scared, but I'm excited. I'm very invested already. I'm having a very good time, feeling a little giddy and kicking my feet while also being trepidatious and scared because it feels like it could be setting up a tragedy that's going to rip my heart out of my chest and stomp all over it. But also, to be fair, many of my favorite books do that. So maybe it's just setting up to be a favorite. Who knows? But I've been talking for long enough, so I'm going to go. I'll be back soon. Okay, bye. Hello, I'm back. I'm halfway through The Everlasting, and I feel like this is one of those books where I simultaneously love it and am appreciative to have read it, and also am very mad at the author for putting me through pain and suffering. So far, this book includes a lot of pain and suffering. I am struggling in a good way, in a way that I am invested in the characters. I care about them and their fate. I want them to be happy and have peace and joy. I want them to have all their dreams come true. And the book is not allowing that. And to be fair, I'm halfway through. Most books don't allow that at the halfway point, but I also am starting to get a pretty strong inkling that this book might never let them have that. And that makes me mad a little bit. I'm really liking this still. I love that in this section, we finally got to hear from Una from her perspective instead of just hearing about her through someone else's eyes. I feel like Harrow was doing a really great job of delivering the complexity, the subtext for Una and her motivations and how she feels about herself and her role in Dominion and her relationship with the Queen and with the people of the land and sort of the way her life has turned out. I think that Harrow did a really good job of portraying that even through other people's eyes, but it comes through even more strongly when you are in Una's perspective. And I'm so glad we finally got it. I was starting to feel a little worried that we would never hear from her directly, and I really wanted her perspective because she's such an interesting character. I think I mentioned this in the last update or in one of the earlier updates that I do feel like one of the things I find is missing often in a lot of fantasy is the acknowledgement of the trauma and the disillusionment, and trying to determine for yourself whether it feels worth the cost. There are some books that are exceptions. Like I mentioned, I think I brought up sort of Kaigan. I would also say that Assassin's Apprentice and the rest of the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb that I read in the fall, I have a reading vlog for that. I think that that series dealt with the emotional weight and the trauma involved in being sort of a chosen one and being involved in others' pain and suffering and grappling with your own sacrifices in the name of greatness and whether it really is great, at the end of the day. And I love getting Una's perspective. I love getting to know how she feels about her life and her contributions. And I also loved, from a romantic point of view, you can tell that I'm enjoying it. I'm getting that giddy kick your feet feeling that you want from a good romance. I love getting her perspective on her love interest. Again, not trying to spoil anything, so I'm not going to mention the love interest's name outside of spoiler sections, but I love finally getting her perspective instead of just the other person's perspective, and the way that she is finding herself drawn to this character and the way she's talking about them and the ways that she is grappling with her experience in the world as an unfeminine woman, as a non-conventional woman, and as a queer woman. I will say there's a lot of queer rep in this book. We continue to get more bisexuals added into the narrative, which is great. Although the latest bisexual to be added is not the best person in general, and also is one of those bisexuals that we don't love to claim, which is the bisexuals who use it as a way to force people even more strongly into gender roles, which baffles me a little, to be honest. One of the most wonderful things I think about being someone who is not monosexual is appreciating all the many varieties of humans and appreciating all the different combinations of traits and features and so on that a person can have, and being able to appreciate that a woman does not look one particular way, a man does not look one particular way. There is no one set definition. Everyone is different. There are more combinations than you could possibly imagine of traits and characteristics, and sort of broadening your mind, broadening the definitions, and being willing to approach gender from a more expansive, a more broad, a more inclusive angle. And so anyway, that was a bit of a sidetrack, but learning that another one of the famous knights from Una's time is bisexual, but uses it as a way to essentially put her down and make her feel insecure about her lack of femininity in his perspective by essentially, while getting intimate with her, telling her that she's lucky that he also sleeps with men, so he's not, scared away by her physicality, by her body, which is more masculine in his perspective. And I hate that. I hate that perspective. I hate that being a woman has to mean being frail and dainty and curvy. So many women are taller, more broad, more muscular, less curvy, and they are all women, and they are all equally valid as women. And this idea that we have to constantly reinforce the most extreme ends of sexual dimorphism when it comes to gender roles is just one of the many things that I struggle with Romantasy, which I talked about in the Romantasy video essay, so I won't get into it all over again, but I love that this book is grappling with those ideas through flipping the dynamic rather than just flipping the dynamic and having a tall, muscular, broad, strong knight of a female character, of a female protagonist or love interest, and then not acknowledging the fact that there are these kinds of expectations. Of course, you could create a world where all women are like that, but in this world, she is one of a kind as a legendary figure, and she is busting through gender norms and expectations for this medieval world that she lives in. And even for the more modern world, she is one of a kind. She is doing something that other women are not allowed or expected to do. And I love that this book is willing to actually engage with those ideas. And my light went out. Anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought because my light ran out of battery and I had to go change it. But anyway, what I'm saying basically is that I appreciate that this book is not only flipping that dynamic and trying something different, but it's also engaging with the ideas and with those harmful, strict gender roles and the impact that those kinds of very strict roles and reinforcing them constantly has on people who do not fall within them, which is, again, something that I'm pretty passionate about. I have personally been antagonized by strict gender roles and expectations of what women and men should be, and so have other people in my life who I love very much. I'm trying to not be too picky because, of course, I really appreciate that this is doing the opposite of what so much romantasy is, with the size and height difference dynamic between the love interests. And I love seeing the woman get to be taller and bigger and stronger and still be desirable. And same for the male love interest, for Una, being smaller and, more dainty. I think he is described as being delicate at times. And he just has that much more maybe breakable quality that a lot of female characters typically are given. The characterization of them being frail or breakable is something that's being applied to the male love interest in this dynamic. And I really appreciate that, and it's great to see something different. I will say I would love books that don't rely on a huge size, strength, power, height difference to create tension. I just feel like there are so many other ways to develop sexual tension and attraction and, protection and love and care and support between characters that has nothing to do with having to have a huge height or size gap, So as much as I appreciate the flip, and I am really enjoying the dynamic, and I do think I personally find it more appealing than the opposite. And maybe that's because I'm a tall woman, and so most people that I meet are going to be shorter than me. And so I have developed a worldview where the people I find attractive tend to be shorter than me. And so maybe that's why I like reading about that kind of a dynamic. It feels more familiar to me. I would just love to read more romance, more romantasy, more romantic relationships, whatever the genre may be, where there doesn't have to be such a huge gap between the two love interests in whatever the category may be, whether it's age or power or wealth or strength or height or size or whatever, that they could just be on an even playing field in every way, but they're still into each other because that's how, that happens every day. It's not just the fact that it's always a bigger, stronger man and a smaller, more fragile woman that bothers me, though it does bother me specifically to have that dynamic. It also bothers me that there is this reinforcing that one person has to fill the big, strong, giant protector role, and the other person has to fill the teeny tiny, dainty, breakable, must be protected role, and that there's very little variation in that, regardless of what gender they may be. So maybe I'm too picky. You let me know in the comments. Again, that's not a knock against this book in general. It's not reducing my enjoyment of the book. I'm just noticing as I read it, getting to read the opposite and realizing that while a lot of it does have to do with the gender roles and how it reinforces roles that I think are strict and harmful, I also think to a certain extent, I just don't like that dynamic very much. And so, yeah, I'm learning things, but I'm really enjoying it. Like I said, loved hearing from Una. I thought it was really interesting to get her perspective of the same events that we saw through another character's eyes first and see how she was reacting to things and what she was thinking in moments where she seemed a little more impenetrable. I found a couple of those moments from her perspective, like I said, had me sort of giggling and kicking my feet, while also feeling like this book was setting me up to be very invested in a romance that had no chance of working out. It really does feel like there's no possible way that we could have a happy ending, and I don't like that. That makes me a little mad. I'm still hoping, and that is the hope that will break my heart if it doesn't go well, but I'm nothing if not a hopeless romantic, and also a little too optimistic for my own good sometimes. But anyway, there were a couple really great quotes in this section, including describing Una as being like a weapon wearing the skin of a woman. Gorgeous. I really appreciate the way that this book is examining imperialism through the lens of propaganda, but also how that ties to legends and myths and storytelling and a narrative, using a framing device of a legend or a myth to give a nation a history to be proud of and a future to fight for, and framing it as every story needs a hero, but also every story needs a villain, and who you choose to be the hero and villain and how you narrate their story can really influence a national identity and give a nation enough cohesion to stick together through times of strife and war, and also inspire the youth to sign up to go to war, to continue to invade and add to this imperialism machine. really fascinating. I'm finding that aspect of the novel very interesting to read about. But I think the last few things that I want to say are spoilers. So let's do a spoiler section for the first half of The Everlasting. You can skip this using the chapters in the description box if you don't want to be spoiled. Spoilers starting now. Okay, so we have now learned not only that our Minister of War was sent back herself and was playing the part of the first Queen of Dominion, but also that she has sent Owen Mallory back multiple times, that this is not the first time he's gone back and won't be the last, and that she is essentially manipulating the story, using him to manipulate the story, the legend of Una Everlasting, again and again to find the perfect combination that allows her in the future to be the leader of a stronger, more cohesive nation. Like I was just talking about, building that narrative with a hero and a villain and a strong, vital past to be proud of, to protect, and a future to fight for. And she is tweaking things here and there, using Una and Owen as lab rats, essentially putting them through pain and suffering and loss and death again and again so that they can slightly alter history and she can see how it plays out. And that is diabolical and also such an interesting idea to see different versions of the future based on how this one legend turns out, and not only how it actually happens, but how it's talked about, how Owen writes about it in this book that is used as a foundation for the greatest legend of this nation and how it can be turned into propaganda. It's so interesting, and it also explains so much because not only are we basically 100% confirmed now that Una and Owen knew each other as children, it's either some sort of latent image of having been sent back to their childhood so many times after having met each other and fallen in love that the other person is trapped somewhere in their psyche, in their instincts, and so they're imagining the other person in their childhood as an imaginary friend, or that they literally were able to break through, within the Queen's Wood by that yew tree. There's some sort of, wavering of the space-time continuum, and they're able to step through it, that there's something connecting them through space and time that is allowing them to spend their childhoods together. Because not only does Owen have these memories of a young girl with, blindingly light hair who he was friends with as a child, who no one else seemed to know existed, but also Una describes knowing a young boy with these doe eyes that she played with as a child, and she then proceeds to describe Owen several times as having large, dark doe eyes or doe lashes. And I just feel like it's confirmation that they, whether it is just like their other sort of memories of each other, whether it's some sort of latent overlay image of a past timeline that's messing with their minds, or whether it's some other timey-wimey business. I love that they are there for each other as children, and I also love that we learn that both Una's great ability with a sword, her sort of supernatural ability to fight, and from a very young age, is because she was sent back multiple times to her childhood after learning to fight and going through all of these quests. So every time she was sent back, she had some sort of remaining, inkling of a muscle memory or some instinct for fighting that would stay with her every time until she became just a fighting machine to such an unnatural degree, because she had lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes of practice, even if she didn't consciously remember them. And then same for Owen, the idea that he is not such an incredible shot just because he's naturally a great shot despite having terrible eyesight. He's an amazing shot because he was sent back so many times that he fought in this war over and over again. And again, there's that muscle memory that kicks in even if he can't consciously remember every time he went to war. And I love that it's engaging with the ideas not only of the trauma of being involved in war, in battles, in causing pain and suffering, which both Owen and Una are dealing with, but also if time travel were real and you were put through something like this over and over and over and over again, there would be some sort of mental toll. How much can your brain hold on to? How many lives can your brain keep compartmentalized? And when those barriers between them start to bleed into each other, they have these moments of, flashing between multiple versions of the same event. And they have these moments of feeling, a phantom pain for an injury that hasn't happened yet or happened in a past version of their lifetime. And it's just so interesting. I love that it's not ignoring the complexity of it. And I also love Owen and Una starting to fall in love every lifetime. They fall in love a little bit more and they open up a little bit more because there are those feelings of familiarity and comfort and safety with each other that they can't quite name. And I feel like it's, it's something that, as sappy as it might sound, again, I said I'm a hopeless romantic. I don't believe in souls as a concept, just to put that out there first. I don't think a soul is a thing, personally, for me. But I do use the term soulmate because I think it's the easiest, most widely understood name for a concept that I feel is real, which is that you can find the person who fits together with you like a perfect puzzle piece. And it's not because, in my personal opinion, once again, it's not because you were both created by some deity to exist together. It's not because there's no one else you could ever love, but just because you are right for each other. And when you meet someone like that, at least in my personal experience, having met the person who I consider to be my soulmate, it does feel like you've always known them. There's this comfort and familiarity and safety from a first conversation, from a first look, from a first touch that is incomparable to anything else. Again, just in my own personal experience, I felt that. I felt that sense of I have always known you somehow and was always meant to know you. And that sense of familiarity is something that I think this book is getting at in such an interesting way with the multiple lives and falling in love with each other again and again, not only because it feels, destined in a way for them to fall in love because it happens over and over again, but also because it's a way to explain that feeling that I think is kind of unexplainable unless you believe in a higher power or something, of meeting someone and not being able to explain how you feel like you already know them and like you're meant to know them and like you were missing something until they entered your life and now everything makes sense. And it's just such a silly romantic cliche, I guess, but that was my experience of meeting my soulmate, my husband, and I didn't think that was real until I experienced it myself. And I don't know how to conceptualize it other than saying soulmates, even though I don't believe in souls. So I just love the way this book is examining that. I really enjoy Owen and Una's dynamic. Kicking my feet when Owen kisses the palm of her hand and Una gets flustered. And I just, I want them to be happy. I want them to have decades of peace and joy and comfort and safety and support for each other and to make out all over the Queenswood to their heart's content and not have to fight and die and sacrifice for an empire they don't believe in anymore. And yet, like I said, I'm not sure that this book is setting up that kind of happy ending, and I'm mad about it. I just also found so many moments in that section a little devastating, especially the first time, at least the first time we read about Una dying and Owen talking to Vivian and saying, I'll write the story so everyone remembers Una, but also I will always remember her. And Vivian saying, you always say that and you never do. That's heartbreaking to have that realization of how many times has he gone back and not remembered his time with Una. And while it does happen again, there's something being stolen from them to give them so many experiences together and then rip them away and not allow them to remember those experiences. So, and I also loved the mirroring of when we're in Owen's perspective, when he talks about having his PTSD flashbacks or having a panic attack and Una holding him, and he would stay in her arms and continue to hold her a little longer after he started feeling back to his baseline, and said something along the lines of, it's so rare for a coward to feel safe. Can you blame me? And then we get Una's perspective. Then I would wrap my arms around you and press your spine to my chest, holding fast until your breathing eased and your body slackened against mine. I did not always let you go as quickly as I should have afterward. Forgive me. A monster so rarely feels wanted. And I just thought the mirroring was great, but also so heartbreaking that they are both so set in their very limited self-perception. Owen believing so wholeheartedly that he is a coward and that he doesn't belong and he has to prove his value to Dominion and that he is a true son of Dominion and that he is a worthy, brave warrior for his empire. And for Una, that she feels like a monster. She feels like all she can bring is death and suffering, and she doesn't feel she deserves tenderness and care and human contact in a loving, tender way. And all she wants is to feel wanted. And it's heartbreaking and beautiful. The first kiss is like the first blow in a fight, a test, an invitation, a wordless question. But it seemed to me we already knew all the answers. I already knew the way your lips would part for me instantly without hesitation, and the way your breath would catch. I knew how it would feel to kiss you in hunger or in comfort, sweetly or sorrowfully, early in the morning or long after moonrise, quietly, so he wouldn't wake the... I pulled away, panting a little. I had to. I loved you by then, or would soon, or always had. It was inevitable, foretold. When I look up, I will see the sky. When I fight, I will win. When I meet Owen Mallory, I will love him. Anyways, it's really getting to my romantic heart, okay? Clearly, as I get all emotional. And I just want them to get to actually be in love and happy together. And fuck Vivian/Yvain for putting them through this torture again and again. Just let them be happy. God damn it. Make up your stupid myth without the reality. Have her fake her death or something and let her run away and be happy with Owen. Anyway, that's it for spoilers. I got a little emotional reading a quote there. I'm loving this so far. I'm going to go read to the 75% mark and then I'll be back to share my thoughts. So see you soon. Okay, I just got to the 75% mark. I am here with Chewy on my lap. I had to ask my husband to come down and turn everything on to start recording because Chewy was cozy. And if you've been here for a while, you know that Yoda is the queen snuggler. When I'm reading, she is often on top of me in one way or another. But Chewy is normally in the periphery. And he was over there sleeping in sight while I was reading, but not touching me. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, he decided he wanted to cuddle while I was reading, and that happened so infrequently that I couldn't disturb him. So here we are. It's getting harder and harder to talk about this without spoilers, as one would expect, because we're farther along in the story. So can I say anything without spoilers? I really like how the romance is progressing a lot. I really like how the characterization is deepening and I was going to say complexing, getting more complex. I enjoy the villain's motivations. I even enjoyed the villain monologue, as tropey as it may be, because I found learning more about the villain's backstory and why they're doing what they're doing and what their inspiration was for doing what they're doing and sort of how they've justified it to themselves really interesting, even if it is a little, overplayed at this point for the villain to tell the protagonist every single thing that they've done and why. I really like how a convention of the book has sort of been used to give us a bit of a montage situation for the main couple as they progress in their relationship. I'm glad we still got some moments, including some of their firsts, because I was a little worried when the montage section started that we were going to skip over all of their relationship development, and that would have sucked after all the teasing up to that point. But thank goodness we were given some of their firsts to enjoy. The book is continuing to really hammer home this theme of stories, narratives, legends, myths being the foundation of nationhood and giving a nation both an identity but also something to fight for, to be the cohesion to hold a nation together. And we've already been exploring that idea before this point, but it definitely comes up again in this section, revealing itself to be, I would say, one of the primary themes of this, along with probably destiny and free will and how many of the choices we make are truly our own and what makes us who we are, especially if we are making decisions that have been in some way determined by our circumstances or by those around us. Now we're getting into spoilers. So these are spoilers all the way up to the 75% mark of The Everlasting. If you have not read up to the 75% mark, which is the beginning of the fourth death of Una Everlasting, Don't watch this part. You know, I probably should have seen it coming, but I definitely did not. I loved both the original reveal that it was Vivian who was playing Yvain at this point in her life, and the story she told about being sent back and meeting Yvain who was sick and taking over for her so she could make it seem like Yvain was healed by the Grail and carry her legacy forward. But I love the reveal, and I was genuinely shocked by the reveal that Yvain actually never existed, that Vivian was born in I don't even think we know exactly what time period she was born in, but in a more modern time period, and sent herself back and created her own legacy, her own legend, her own myths, her own background to create not only this empire, but a queenhood for herself, to give herself the power she wanted. I invented a lineage for myself, gave myself a name, a title, a birthright. Oh, don't give me that look. How do you think any king gets his crown? And made her my champion. She was very good, but I made her better. Each time I sent her back, she was a little faster, a little stronger. Her blows were more precise, her deflections more perfect. The body remembers, you see, even when the mind forgets. What is it, buddy? He's settling in next to me. You probably can't see him on camera. I think he's just out of frame. Oh, what a sweetheart. Okay, I pictured it. You as a young woman, untried, desperate to prove yourself, failing in your very first duel. But you were not buried and mourned. You were dragged back to the beginning, sent out to die again and again. You were not a girl, but iron in the furnace, and Vivian was the hammer that fell over and over. She had not made you, but forged you and wet you in your own blood. Just... oh, and it's so, I love how that continues through this whole section of first Owen realizing and then later Una realizing that she never had a choice, that so much of her life was constructed to create this narrative, to make her a myth, a legend, and she was never allowed to be a real person, that she was an actor playing a part, even though she didn't know it and didn't have any lines to follow, that she was forced to live and fight and die again and again and again until she could be exactly what Vivian wanted and needed from her, even as Vivian's needs and wants changed over time. She would use Una again and again for her purposes. I tried it other ways, of course, but the tragedy is absolutely critical. If there's something lost, there's something to restore. If there's sacrifice, there's something worth sacrificing for. There are only two kinds of stories worth telling, the ones that send children to sleep and the ones that send men to war. I needed the second kind, and it keeps us exceptional, she and I. Alive, Una would be an inspiration to every schoolgirl and housewife. Dead, she's a warning. Neoliberal feminism strikes again. She doesn't want to lift all women along with her. She wants to be the exception and the special one in a world made for men. Next time, I'll remember more. Next time, I'll save her. She nodded. I agree, she answered as the world fell away. That's why there won't be a next time. And just, my stomach dropped. And then we go through this whole thing again, except this time she doesn't send him back. She has him write his translation in a straightforward way, like he expected to the very first time. And he has all these weird flashbacks. He has all these layered memories. He has this longing and this yearning and this grief and this anger he can't explain. He knows things are wrong and off, but he doesn't know how or why. He can't access those memories. And I understood finally that a nation is a house with no windows or doors at all, that no matter what I did, no matter how much blood I spilled in its defense or ink I spent in its praise, it would never, ever be my home. But if Dominion was not my home, where was it? Not the fetid flat above the butcher shop, not my father's narrow grey house in Queenswold, and surely not my mother's country, which I had known only as an infant and later as an invader. I would only be a different kind of stranger there anyway. Instead of being surprised when I spoke their language, people would be surprised when I didn't. No, the word home evoked only the sweet green smell of the woods long gone, and sometimes another word. You, I thought. Or perhaps you. And I'd been waiting for that moment at the end of chapter 15 for the whole book, because we keep having this repetition of you, as so much of Owen's perspective is him talking directly to Una, calling her you, but then also they are always meeting again and again at the yew tree, and I was like, it's you and you, like obviously at some point we're going to have this connection made. And as much as it is very on the nose and maybe a little artificial and saccharine, I still liked it. I felt it was satisfying for that connection to finally be made, as much as I was just waiting for it to happen, and it felt very intended from the beginning. I've bought into this specific brand of overwroughtness, as Vivian would probably put it, and him living this life where he gets everything he ever wanted, but he knows he's lost something even if he doesn't know what it was. You know that history is mostly happenstance, accidents piled on top of mistakes, a series of dice rolled in dim rooms by careless hands. hands. It is not a lesson until we learn it. It is not a story until we tell it. And every story serves someone. I do find, as much as I love this message, as much as I love the idea of exploring history as, sorry, Chewy's licking himself next to me and shaking the chair. As much as I agree with this idea of history as a narrative that is twisted to serve the purpose of whoever is telling it, and, you know, history, legends, myths as tools for propaganda, and stories we tell, narratives we create about ourselves to create that shared national identity, and on, you know, inspirations for invasions and empires. I do find, again, as much as I agree with it, as much as I like the writing style, and I like how, you know, the very unique and creative way that Harrow is exploring this idea, I do feel like it is a little on the nose. It's repeating the ideas a lot, and it's doing so in very explicit language. And the book feels, it doesn't feel like a book for a younger audience. It does feel like an adult story, but I do sometimes feel like it's pandering a little bit. It's a little, and some of that is just my own personal taste. I prefer when books, when they require a little bit more of me to figure them out and to understand the themes and be, you know, get myself on the same page as the author. It's all being delivered to me on a platter a little too easily. And I think I wouldn't necessarily notice as much or be bothered by it if it wasn't happening again and again. But it is quite repetitive, and part of it is that the nature of the story of it being this time travel looping story, it is by its very nature repeating itself. And so some of these conversations are happening more than once, even if they're in different flavors or happening at slightly different times in the timeline or between different people. It's starting to feel a little tedious, and only a little. And I think because I'm enjoying this so much, I am maybe being more critical of the little things. I'm still loving it. I just wish it was a little less on the nose about some of its themes. And I think at this point was the most obvious, because he has this conversation with Sawbridge and she says that very explicitly. And then he goes back through and reads histories trying to identify whose interest it is serving for these narratives to be told in this very particular way. And he's identifying that. And it just, again, feels very, it's stated in the simplest, most obvious terms, and it's kind of beating you over the head with it. You know, it goes through multiple examples of how history is rewritten to serve the interests of the person who is commissioning this rewrite, usually whoever's in power. And I guess it's sort of framed as him explaining it to Una, I guess. I don't know. I felt it was a bit much in this chapter specifically. He says, "Do you see now what Sawbridge did? That's not history, that's a story designed to teach us who to hate and who to obey, what god to worship and what flag to fight for, and what color eyes are the most beautiful. It's a story that made a continent into a kingdom, into an empire, that put a woman on the throne more than once, I suspected." Which, like, we just got that a couple pages back. Didn't I even read that quote out loud? "And so all of this, my life and your death, and the lives and deaths of every soldier in every crusade, was to put the same woman on the same throne twice." I don't know why we need to hear it again. And it's not like this is a super bloated book. Like, I've read quite a few books recently that I would say are easily 100 plus pages longer than they needed to be. And there is a lot of repetition or just sort of waffling about that doesn't need to be there. This book is pretty tight. It's coming in at just about 300 pages, just over. That's pretty short for a standalone fantasy. And yet, again, by its nature, it's quite repetitive. I accept that because that is the structure of the storytelling. But even if the plot and some of these interactions and realizations are repetitive or have to happen more than once, there has to be a balance between repeating things, you know, characters having repeated realizations and the audience or the reader having to experience in real time the characters having the same realizations again and again, especially when it's explaining things in such obvious terms, when it's already been explained multiple times, either very explicitly or at the very least very clearly in the subtext. But I just think that this is really leaning into over-explaining itself. And that's too bad, because I really feel like this book is doing a great job of handling its repetitive nature very well. And the only place where I feel it's falling a little short is in expressing its themes in a way that is a little bit more subtle, I guess. And now I'll stop talking about it because I just went on such a long rant about that for no reason. I'm just a bit frustrated by it because I'm loving the book so much and I want to love every part of it. And then we also get the reveal that Owen's father isn't actually his father. He says, I drank because I was a shit father and my leg hurt like a bastard, and because I loved you. But before I loved you, before I even knew you existed, I'd hurt you badly and there was no fixing it, no going back. And then Owen is reflecting on this. I was a mere byproduct of war, one of tens of thousands of orphans left by centuries of wars and crusades. But I had lived because my mother loved me enough to take a bullet to the spine, and my father, yes, he was my father, though perhaps not my only one, had loved me enough to put a bullet in his own leg. With this thought came a great clarity. Everything I had believed in and fought for, crown and country, the flag and the church, even the past itself, had proved false. What remained were those trivial, nameless moments, which would be swallowed up by the tide of history and forgotten. My father's hand on my hair when I was a boy, ruffling it awkwardly. The brusque press of Sawbridge's lips on my cheek. Your eyes on mine at the very end, full of faith, so certain I would come back for you. If I serve anything, let it be that. If I die for anything, let it be you. When Owen arrives back in time and he is reunited with Una and he tells her the reality of who Yvain was and who Vivian is and what she'd done, I loved Una's reckoning with her history and what it means and how that changes her identity or selfhood. I was sorry, I suppose, to lose whatever stubborn pride still remained to me, to learn that all my great deeds and noble battles had been carefully staged performances, my victories assured, my death predetermined. I was even sorrier to lose the last scraps of my selfhood, to know that I had not lived a life but merely played a part, that I was not a woman but only a painted icon with lacquer for skin and oil paint for eyes. But I was sorriest of all to lose Yvain, finally and forever. When I first saw Yvain that day in the woods, gazing down at me with such endless needing, when she whispered my new name in my ear, it was like being born anew. In this new life, she was my God and my religion, my savior, my queen, my mother. And then having that realization that maybe her father's died because Yvain needed Una to have no attachment to her past life and to dedicate herself wholeheartedly to Yvain. I wondered how many tries it had taken her before she found the thing that would send me to the U and then to war, the single moment that would turn me from a child to a blade. I wondered how many times my fathers had been killed, how many times they had clasped hands as they died. It felt awful, this letting go, like falling on the field, like losing a limb, like killing the girl who'd been born that day in the woods, bathed in the blood of her enemies, and not knowing who was left. And again, I just love that this book is acknowledging the emotional and mental load of everything that's happening. This level of time travel in your own timeline, this many lives lived, this much trauma and suffering and death and loss and devastation would have an impact on a person. You know, the human psyche is fragile. And I appreciate that this book is trying to examine what that would do to a person and how their identity would shatter under that pressure. I also love this quote, she carried no sword, but she was weapon enough. I find it interesting also that at the beginning of chapter 18, they highlight that as they're spending time together, they are, learning each other's bodies. They are living on the run, trying to carve out a life for themselves. They knew each other's taste and smell, the sounds they made in the night and the old wounds that turned stiff in the rain. The scholar knew every scar on the knight's body and where it came from, save the small silver circle between her breasts, which she must have gotten as a child, for she couldn't recall a time when it wasn't there. And I feel like highlighting it so specifically makes me think that that is going to become relevant later, either that is somehow tied to how she and Owen are connected, or that it is tied to maybe the earliest time that Yvain/Vivian ever went back, and that she did something to Una right off the bat to connect her to this magic. I'm curious to know what it will end up being. Their choice to have children while they're on the run actively from a mass murdering, power hungry, magic wielding queen/chancellor is certainly a choice. I mean, I'm happy for them. There's so many sweet moments here as they develop their relationship further and they settle down and they have children, and that's lovely and all. But as they acknowledge what kind of future do these kids have, even if they aren't found, what kind of future do these kids have? I don't know. I did like this moment, though. I don't know that I'd be everything a mother should. I'm not sure you've ever been what you should be, love. You were a woman who carried a sword, a saint who slept with nuns. Don't pretend you never visited Morvain in the convent. Now you're a knight without armor and a wife without a ring. No matter what you are, you're always bad at it. Yourself, said the scholar stubbornly, and you'll remain so, whatever you become next. The scholar looked down at his son and thought, here at last is something worth dying for. The knight looked at the scholar, looking at his son, and thought, here at last is something worth killing for. Of course, they're not allowed to just be happy, but I love how this chapter 19, ends. He should have known, of course. Heaven is only a fairy tale. The devil is real. And the devil's name is Vivian / Yvain / all the other names of the queens that she has been. Anyway, not much of that was non-spoilery, but those were some of my notes and thoughts as we went along. I guess the one thing that I'm not sure how much of how I worded it could be non-spoilery, so I'll do a little summary of it in case to insert it in the non-spoiler section. But I will say that as much as I enjoy the themes and how Harrow is exploring them through this really unique plot device, I do think that it is a little on the nose. It's a little over-explained. The themes of story as a tool of empire, myths and legends as narratives to be spun, as propaganda, as the glue that holds a nation together, or that she's so enjoying exploring the idea, she's enjoying writing about it, that she indulged herself to write about it many times in many ways. And that's great and all, but at some point we have to move on. At some point we either have to find another angle, we have to expand that to something else, we have to just show the idea through what's happening. And I think that especially there was one chapter in this section that just felt like I was being hit over the head again and again and again with this idea when we'd already been exploring it the whole time. It wasn't like it was a new revelation, maybe for Owen, but not for us, not for my specific preferences as someone who likes a little bit more trust from an author to meet them where they're at thematically. So even though I have, a few nitpicks and pet peeves coming up as I go along, I think I'm getting pickier because I really like it, but I am seeing little things here and there that I wish were just a little bit more refined or tightened a little bit or expanded on a bit more. And because I'm loving it so much, I sort of want that from it. I've been rambling. I feel like I just talked for way longer than I planned to, because of course I did. Future me will edit this to be less redundant, which is what I wish more authors would do. I am loving this, even though I'm being critical of it. I think that section, just that one particular chapter, really irked me with the way that it restated the themes that we've already had stated in very clear terms so many times. Kicked something off in my brain where I got annoyed. It did end on a bit of a cliffhanger. I do want to know what happens next. I am scared that it's going to be depressing and sad, and I'm going to be upset when it's over. I guess we'll find out. I'm gonna go finish it, and I'll be back when I get to the end. I just finished The Everlasting. I cry pretty frequently in general as a human, and I cry more these days working through the stages of grief. And I cry usually at least once while reading books that end up being a favorite, but I don't always capture the magic on camera, and I feel quite vulnerable to be totally honest, but this is my genuine reaction. Was this a totally perfect book in every possible way? Did I have zero critiques? No. Did it take me on a journey and bring me out of my day-to-day life and make me care so deeply about fictional characters that only exist as ink on a page and in the minds of the people reading about them and the one who created them, so much that I am a sobbing mess now on camera for people to watch on the internet? Yes. And what are stories for, if not to make us think or feel deeply? Ideally both, and for me this did both. Do I think this is a flawless masterpiece? No. Did I love it? Yes. Am I kind of mad at it for making me hurt so much? Yeah, a little bit. A little bit. I'm trying to think of every book I've ever read that could even be remotely considered romantasy. Is this my favorite romantasy I've ever read? Probably. Was this a 5-star read for me? Indubitably. Was it very refreshing to read about a passionate and enduring, destined sort of love story where the dynamic is not the exact same dynamic I have read a million times in romantasy? Yes, God, please, more of this. Like, not only did this have more diversity in especially the representation for queer characters of many kinds, it was so refreshing for this to have a different romantic sexual dynamic, for the characters to not fit the absolute most extreme sexual dimorphism, strict gender role boxes that so much romantasy pushes out there. Just so lovely. And for it to actually engage with the reality of that instead of imagining a world where this reversed sort of dynamic is just the norm. My heart hurts right now, both because of what the characters went through and some of the reveals near the end and just the grief and the love, but also because of how it made me reflect on and feel about my own life and my own grief and the pain of losing someone you love and having to live on without them, the pain of holding someone you love as they pass and how hard that is, and the idea of having to do that more than once, again and again and again. Really fucking hurts. If you are a fan of fantasy, if you enjoy fantasy that has romance, this is pretty solidly a romantasy, because I would say that the love story is at the core of the plot, the characterization, the themes. So much of what this book is doing and exploring and saying is about love and about this specific love story. I think the characterization is great. I think it's a very innovative, interesting, unique take on fantasy, on wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff, on, you know, a fresh perspective, an interesting angle to look at imperialism, propaganda, power, fate, destiny, free will, choice, love, sacrifice, loyalty, the price we're willing to pay for what we believe in and who we love. I can see its flaws. I think it does have flaws. I also think it was beautiful. It made me very emotional. I think the characters are so well drawn. They have many layers. They feel vividly real. Their love feels real. Their lives feel real. Their doubts and insecurities and hopes and dreams and fears and angers and senses of humor and prickly bits all feel very real. And their love story felt very real and had me giggling and kicking my feet, and also having a hugely impending sense of dread of the possibility of anything bad happening to them. I was so fully invested, and I think it's very worth a read. I think I'm going to keep it there for the non-spoilers. I don't want to say too much. I don't want to ruin anything. I've tried to be very careful about what I say in the non-spoiler sections of this video, because I don't want to ruin the experience for anyone who might pick this up. And obviously, clearly, I would recommend you do. I feel like this might become a comfort story for me. All of you who recommended this, you know what you're talking about. I shouldn't be shocked. You all have great taste. And now, somehow, I will try to pull myself together to do a bit of a spoiler section to talk about the end of this book. Let's talk spoilers for The Everlasting now. This is for the whole book. Skip these if you haven't read this yet. Okay, holy shit. They had built a home, had 2 children. Vivian finds them, murders Una, and forces Owen to go back and do what she says. Otherwise, she will murder his children, their children. But either way, they're going to blink out of existence. And the implication is, from what she tells him, that this has happened before, that she's let them do this before. And every time they've had children together, they've had the same boy and girl, which is devastating. How many times have they had these children and lost them? So they go back and do do it again. And Una and Owen have this plan for how they're going to finally end it with Vivian. And they go back to before everything. Before the yew tree existed, they're going to destroy the seed and the book, and they're going to live in this ancient time before Vivian existed in any form and finally be free of her. And they wake up on this hill holding the seed of the yew tree, and up the hill comes this girl, this young woman who is Vivian. She existed before the tree. She planted the tree. The seed of the yew tree is the heart of a dragon. I should have known. I should have known that there was a reason why we learned about the heart of the dragon. But I was right about making a note about the scar on Una's chest, that she couldn't remember it, and then it had to be tied to the yew tree or the magic or her connection to Owen somehow. She was Vivian's daughter, and the man who groomed her and owned her, who bought her from her parents, forced her to take medication to cause a stillbirth. The plan being to use a heart that had not yet been born to plant this seed, to grow this tree, to create access to immortality, essentially. And she killed him and planted the seed in her stillborn daughter's heart and used her daughter, who was born dead, as an eternal sacrifice, essentially. She flat out tells Una that every moment of life that she had was a gift that Vivian gave her as her mother, that she was born dead and would have never had a life if Vivian hadn't given her this time. And sure, she was sacrificed again and again, but she was also brought back again and again, and she was given strength. She was given a name. She was given a legacy. She was loved and revered and turned into a saint. Myths and songs and stories were told about her. She was given Owen to love her. Shouldn't she be grateful? Just such a twisted dynamic. And Owen even says at one point, as if a child is born owing their parents. And sadly, I think that's not an uncommon perspective, or at least not uncommon in rhetoric that I have heard from parents and children who have talked about how their parents talk to them. This idea of owing your parents for your life. How can you ever repay that? You're constantly, forever, eternally in their debt. And that is exaggerated tenfold, hundredfold, 1,000-fold with this mother-daughter dynamic. And the despair for them realizing that they can't end the cycle because Vivian was there first, and realizing the reality that as much as she is the villain of this story, she also was victimized. She was purchased and then abused and groomed. And even though she gained access to time travel and to essentially immortality, she could never go back to her own past before she planted the seed in her stillborn daughter to change her own life, to save herself from her own suffering. And there is so much tragedy in that, despite how much pain and suffering she caused so many others in so many lifetimes. I couldn't help but feel so much empathy for what she went through. And I think Harrow did a great job of writing Owen and Una feeling empathy and despair for what she went through, at the same time as hating her very being, her essence, everything about what this suffering turned her into. And she thinks she can manipulate Una into doing whatever she wants. Again, she has Owen. She can threaten his life. And instead, Owen sacrifices himself to free Una, and Una kills her mother to end the cycle for good. And then she plants the seed in Owen so that he can maybe grow back, and he does. She waits and waits and waits and becomes a new version of a lone hero or a lone knight or a legend or a myth, as this sort of vigilante, helping those around her, keeping the wood safe, keeping these people safe, protecting the yew until Owen can come back and he's reborn, changed from the experience, with white hair and amber eyes, just like Una, having been brought back from the dead. And they're finally able to have their final happily ever after, live together for much longer than a normal lifetime, but still not for an eternity, have their 2 children, again, the same 2 children, and have grandchildren, and be reunited with Una's fathers, and have them in their grandkids' lives, and touch the lives of the people they loved one more time. And the whole ending just was totally devastating and heartbreaking to me on so many levels. And it's a much happier ending than I thought they would get. And I'm grateful for that. But it also hurt like hell to read. Was it a little over the top saccharine? Probably. Clearly, it doesn't bother me. I was so invested in the emotion of it all. I was so invested in these characters. I wanted them to have a happy ending, so I was happy they got it. Is it realistic? No, but nothing about the book is realistic, so it's okay. And I thought it was quite touching. They even brought Hen back. Freaking love Hen. I'm happy he came back. They say one day the knight and the scholar simply laid themselves down among the tangled roots, hand in hand, and did not rise again. They say it ends where it began, beneath the yew tree. You know, not only the moment where Owen says that home is you, meaning Una, and the yew, meaning the tree, but also that Una is the tree. She was born of the tree. She is, the yew is her and she is the yew. They are one and the same. And now Owen is not only her heart because they are inextricably linked because of their love and their commitment to each other, but he is also now the yew tree in his own time. They are both the same tree, and no wonder they were magically, eternally linked, even if it's all timey-wimey and out of order. I think I talked about most of the ideas, the themes, what the book was doing thematically, what it was exploring in earlier updates, and now I'm just so emotional that I don't know. I just feel so drained emotionally in a good way. I went through the catharsis and now I'm on the feeling a little, you know when you finish a really good book and you kind of feel drunk? Such as me. That's how I feel. I think that's it for spoilers. I need a very long nap, a good hug from my soulmate, some snuggles from my cats, and a few business days to process and recover from this experience. Highly recommend. 5 stars for the everlasting. If you have more recommendations like this, leave them in the comments down below. I'm not going to read them right away because I need a second. But please leave more. If you have read more romantasy like this at all, similar, please leave it down below. Any book in general that made you feel similarly to this, leave it down below. More romances with this kind of eternal soulmate kind of love that destroys you, leave those down below. Again, I'll need a minute before I can wade into any of that, but I would love your recommendations. If you've read this, please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I would love to talk more about it. I would love to know how you felt about it, how you reacted to it. Am I the only one who was a total mess? Or am I one among many? Let me know. What an experience. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. I make videos like this regularly. That's kind of my whole thing. I read books and I talk about them. So join me here if you haven't already. Thank you again so much to Quince for sponsoring this video. You can use this QR code or the link in my description box to shop today. And remember, they have 365-day a year free returns and shipping. Thank you again to Quince for sponsoring this video. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you so much. And I will see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.